just in case if anyone missed it, I would say Australia is one of the greatest destinations to consider if you are considering a future in sports. That is one thing. Or if you want to practice, maybe after your masters or after a good amount of experience post your bachelor's, if you want to move somewhere to work. So either ways, that's a great practice because a lot of great practices have originated in the Australian subcontinent, right from your manual therapy, mobilization, etc. And they have a very rich physiotherapy culture. So I think that is one of the biggest pros. The downside is probably, securing scholarships, fundings, and getting the licenses, the procedure, the amount of time it takes to finish your licensing, the cost involved. Acceptance is difficult, but once you get it, I think to get the credentials right, that is difficult. But I think once you get that right, it's one of the best things that you may consider. Also, the weather, food, everything. You need to consider a lot of things, but yes, the weather is great most of the times. People are very easygoing and low key. They don't care, and you might have to learn a little bit of, getting their accent can be a little difficult, but that's not a con. So yes, that is something that if you're considering sports, if you're considering a practice later on post bachelor's, I think either ways it's really good in terms of lifestyle, in terms of earning, and satisfaction career wise. So yeah, and if you need any help with universities, of course, briefly, I think the group of 8 universities, they are the best in Australia. So they provide the best form of education for all the streams, including physiotherapy. Funding could be a little challenge, so that's the con. So that is Australia. Since I have a little experience, I think I would leave it to Oasis and others who are there in the US, and I think Neha, she's in the UK. I think they'll be able to give you a better view about things there. So yeah.
All right, great. I think that was a good introduction to Australia as a potential destination. Neha, would you want to speak a little bit about the UK?
Yes, sure. So, pros and cons about the UK. I'll talk about the cons first. The con about UK right now, given the current situation that we're in, it's very unpredictable and uncertain as to what the job opportunities are here. But going back, even if we start to speak about universities, there are a couple of universities that you can go for PT. I think University of Birmingham has a really good course. They also offer, I think, sports medicine as well. Depending on if you want to do pure PT or sports medicine, you can go for that. Nottingham is good as well, and there's a university called UCLan, which is really good. Has good amount of hands-on experience that they offer. Other than that, I think Manchester is all right. They have the modules that they have are more research based, and I think it's the same with Cardiff University. So it completely depends on you which sort of course you want to go for. If you want to go for pure PT courses, or you want to venture out into something else. After that, I think cons. So again, job opportunities right now, can't be sure about what's going on in the current situation. So that might be a bit tricky. The pros are that the HCPC license is relatively easier to get. There's no exam that you have to go through. You just have to send in a few documents and send in your experiences, your course, any observation work that you've done here or in India. And I think that should suffice for you to get your application. The application process takes a long time. So if you are considering doing your master's in the UK, I would recommend starting your applications first alongside your university application, so you can do some part-time PT assistant jobs while you're studying your master, so you get an idea of what you want to do after your course finishes in the UK. So yeah, get your license done, which is very easy. Secondly, jobs are relatively easy to get if the situation is good. So before the coronavirus situation happened, there were a lot of people recruiting, a lot of physios that were required because of Brexit. A lot of the European physios were going back to their own countries, so UK had uh, a lot of requirement for physios in the NHS and in the private sector. So hopefully when things get better, that will again open up. So jobs are relatively easier to get. Um, the interview process is relatively simple. They just want to know what kind of practice you follow as a physio, uh, what kind of treatments do you offer, and what you bring to the table rather than your qualifications and what how qualified you are basically, and your grades and all of that doesn't even matter. And another question that a lot of people have asked me is, does the university matter? Do they ask you which university you graduated from in the UK? To be very honest, I've given 6 interviews so far, and no one has asked me which university I did it from. No one has asked me my grades in the university, or even which course I did. It's just me mentioning that I'm doing this course from this university. So no, the university doesn't really matter. They're more interested in you as a therapist. So I would say that's a good advantage of the UK. Thirdly, the pay scale. So in the NHS, there's a different pay scale. They follow the band system. So if you're an entry level graduate, which means if you have 0 experience in the UK, that means you start at band 5. Or maybe if you have a master's, you can go for a band 6, but I haven't heard anyone who's directly gone to a band 6. So you start as a band 5, and there's a different salary scale for each band, and you have to, I think, wait and work for 3 years to go up a band, because in the NHS it depends on your seniors. If they leave for a better job, then you get an appraisal. It doesn't depend on, okay, you're performing well and then you get an appraisal. In the private sector, it's a bit different. You can apply for appraisals after 2 years or maybe 3 years, and it's easier to go up the ladder, but obviously then your scope of practice is just restricted to MSK or sports, and yeah, it's quite narrow. But in the NHS, you'll get to uh, go in multiple fields. Like you can do the respiratory ward, the ICUs. You can get to do the geriatric ward as well. It completely depends on what you're interested in and what if you want to explore. So I would say those are the pros and cons of the UK, I guess.
That was extensive, and that was really helpful. There were several things I wasn't aware of myself, especially about the experience-related bands.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very interesting way of selecting how you reward, if I might use that word, your therapists for the work they do. And that actually is a good segue into probably asking Bhakti about her opinion on how the system works in the US, because I think of all the people in this chat on this video call, I think Bhakti has the most experience, so it would be interesting to hear what she has to say. Go ahead, Bhakti.
Okay. Thank you, always. So basically, the US system is very different from how I just heard about Australia and UK. There is no band system. But okay, let me talk about the cons first, because we're talking about pros and cons, and I have to focus to only answer those questions. So the con is one, your cost for masters or whatever education you come here is really high. Second, visa status. Though it is very easy to get a student visa because obviously they want to up their economy, whatever. But also it is very difficult. And lately I've been hearing a lot from my juniors as well as people from other sectors complaining about how getting a work visa has gotten really difficult. And not just the work visa, also the green card process is much, much longer now compared to when I started. So that is something you want to keep in mind, that, think about at least 10-15 years to get a green card if you're starting now. So that is a very major con. Apart from that, also not just the visa process, now talking about the education. So earlier when I came in, we had masters in physical therapy, which is not a program offered by most universities anymore. So they have moved from Sorry about the distraction. So they have moved from getting a master's program to getting a DPT, which is a doctorate in physical therapy. Now, it is an entry level course for people who have just graduated from college in the US. But because most of us Indians, we already do have a bachelor's from India, we are not directly qualified for the DPT. So they call something called as a transitional DPT. So you might want to look into that. Also, as I heard someone speak, that the university you graduate from doesn't matter anymore. um, I totally agree with that. When you go out to get a job, no one asks you what university you graduated from. Unless your aim is to get a PhD, then the university matters, because then that's how the funding and everything comes into picture. But if you are working only to get into a clinical side of practicing as a physical therapist, doesn't matter what university you graduate from. Also, the licensing work. Lately, I've heard that there's a lot of restrictions and a lot of eligibility criteria and a lot of things that come into play about taking the National Physical Therapy Examination, or the NPTE, which is the license exam. So that is something you might want to think about. Um, the paperwork, so the exam itself is not very difficult, but the paperwork needs to start much more in advance, because it takes a lot of time to clear each step. And I think Tanvi and other people in the US will agree about that. Cons wise, I have to think about the cons. Well, of course, compared to India, the professional level at which you are practicing is much better. Everything is more uh, professionally documented. The role you play, you know. So there's so many things to discuss about this. The pay wise is good. You get good satisfaction after working, and when you see patients getting better. So if you guys have any specific questions, then I'd be happy to answer. And I think that's it for me.
All right. I think that was a brilliant, detailed as well as specific answer. And I really like the fact that you mentioned the fact that if you want to enter into academia and go into like more higher studies, like a PhD, or looking to enter into teaching or research, then the university probably matters, because they care about stuff like that, the reputation of the people you work with. So I completely agree with that. And that was wonderful, and that actually helps me point the mic towards Tanvi, who can probably tell us a lot more about private practice and the opportunities in the US to live, work, and earn, and have some fun as well while we're at it. So go ahead, Tanvi.
Um, I absolutely agree to whatever Bhakti has said so far. I think it's absolutely on point. I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to do some research work right after I graduated from my master's. Um, I did my master's from University of Pittsburgh, which is in Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, I just know more about my university than other universities offering either an MS degree or a DPT degree or a TDPT degree, which is a transitional DPT, which Bhakti briefly spoke about earlier. And with the research opportunities that I've got, I think it was very extensive and eye-opening, owing to the very limited view of research I got when I was in India. So I think that was a very pro point for me to tell somebody who would want to consider. Um, I I honestly like the opportunity USA gives you because they are very open to failure, which I think is very important for people to understand. And especially because from the mindset we come from in India, where failure is looked down upon, I think USA doesn't really care how often you fail. It still gives you the opportunity to stand up and go out and, I think, find your path. For people who are doing bachelor's or who have finished masters in PT, um, it's not necessary for them to go out and practice PT, because there are a lot of other branches you can consider over here. You could get into exercise physiology, you can get into sports medicine, um, you can get into management. So I think these are more or less the pros for me, what makes me want to be here to practice. And I think Bhakti has already spoken about the cons, which I think for most of us is the visa issue. It's something you cannot ignore. I mean, it's a necessity if you want to be a practice here. And if your aim is to want to go back to India, open your practice, or do whatever you want to, I think then it really doesn't matter. You could just pick whichever university you want and I guess have a good time over here. And another thing I want to bring to notice from my experience is the evidence-based practice, which I've learned to apply to my practice and to me as a person to grow over here. Because I think most of us just used our textbook knowledge to help patients with their rehab or, in their research or protocol, and using evidence-based medicine, which I think was really important to learn about from the basic. Nevertheless, we got the opportunity to learn over here, has been an eye opener. And I think everybody who is either pursuing their masters or wishes to pursue them, I think it's an ocean out there. Though we are relatively a very young field in the healthcare system, but I think there's a lot to explore. So I hope I've not deviated too much from the topic, and I was able to give a brief about it.
No, I think that was really, really interesting. And I mean, what really struck me was the point that you made about the freedom to fail, which I think was something which I didn't really think about at all. But when you say it that way, it is true, because even if your GPA here isn't great, or if you fail some exams, or you end up doing something you don't really want to do, you always have the option to switch, to do something else, to explore different avenues, and no one's going to stop you. There's no fixed path for anyone here, because if you're in a university, you have so many different people doing so many different things, and like the world is your oyster. So I really agree with that point. And yeah, thank you for that. And most importantly, I feel we should not forget about India itself, even though we've discussed all the different countries and everyone's work experiences. So I think this is like a good time to bring in Pankhuri, who's currently working in India as a therapist, and see what she has to say. So Pankhuri, go ahead.
Hi, always.
Hi Pankhuri, I think your video is
Hello.
lost. Oh yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, always. Thank you so much. Um, so yeah, I've been working in here after my masters. I've been doing my freelancing for a year, and after that, I'm a lead physiotherapist for the golf academy. It's a golf academy, but over here the sports science system, they see a lot of other sports as well. We see a lot of Ranji cricketers coming from Andhra, Gujarat, all these teams, even from Punjab. So all over India, basically, they come over here, they do their rehabs, and then they are off to play their matches, their seasons. So what I feel is, so the moment I joined over here, I was exposed to a huge sports science team, which included a lot of strength and conditioning professionals, sports nutritionists, sports psychologists, mind training person, then yoga teacher, many other things. Also the academics, the coaches, everyone. And I observed what was lacking in my master's education was a holistic approach to everything. So we are always exposed on the field towards the athletes, towards the OPD setup, and we see only one dimension of things. But over here, what was different was you have to collaborate with each and every person who is related to the athlete's well-being. It's not just you, it's not just a physio, it's a sports orthopedician, it's an SNC coach, and uh, it's very important to maintain that rapport with each and every person, how you have to maintain their position, their profession, your professional limits. Plus you have to sometimes take a stand for yourself for your assessment, because things can differ, and it's very important to take that stand, take that risk sometimes. And these things are never taught in the college, apparently. So I actually wish to have a session with the juniors and with everyone else who wish to explore more in this area, because this is something that we've never done, and it's been a learning process for me throughout the year. Pay scale wise, I would say that currently India has got a different pay scale everywhere. Bangalore, especially, it's offering the most pay scale, I think, for sports physios. And in Mumbai, I didn't find many opportunities in this area. But yeah, that's how it is. If there's any other questions specific to this, I can again get back to you.
All right, great, Pankhuri. I really like the fact that you're interested in sharing your experiences with the juniors, especially about the practical aspects of really working with a sports team, living in a residential facility, and working with the people there, and collaborating with people who might not have the same direction that you've had in life, and how you communicate professionally. I think
Yeah,
that's a really important thing to learn as a clinician. So thank you for sharing that, and I'm sure we can organize a session for you to speak to people who are
definitely.
specifically interested in the the psychology of the sports therapy, as well as any sort of professional conduct in a sports thing. And I'm sure Vaishnavi would be a good person to collaborate with uh, for that particular talk. So perhaps you two can
Definitely.
get together and come up with a time which works for you all, and we can organize something. So thank you for
Sure.
that. And okay, moving ahead, I see there are three questions which we've gotten in. One is from Kanishka. This is for Bhakti specifically. Um, the question is, can you share your experience while working in a hospital versus private sector versus preschool for children with autism? I'm personally interested in knowing about working with children with autism. So, Bhakti, if I don't know if Bhakti is still.
Yes, I'm still here.
All right, there you
Yes,
go. Sorry.
happy to answer that question. So, because I'm going to go from the fact that you guys, need a little more exposure about how things work here in terms of clinical practice. So basically, working in a hospital, there is two there's two domains to it. One is working in an acute care setting, and working in a bedside setting in the hospital itself. Now, what that means is, suppose, let's say, for example, the ICU, right? So I've had the opportunity to work in the ICU at a very renowned hospital called the New York Presbyterian Hospital in New York City. So, uh, I mean, considering it is in the top 5 hospitals in the country, I am thinking that it generalize, whatever I'm saying is going to generalize to most hospitals in the country, but of course it can vary from hospital to hospital. So in a bedside setting, you actually take all your tools as a therapist, what you think you might need, and go to the patient's bedside and treat them bedside one-to-one. Uh, the timing can vary depending on the diagnosis of the patient and what the patient has versus what you think in the moment is necessary to do with the patient. Now, acute physical therapy, in terms of another other domain to it, is, for example, the patient is admitted to the hospital for acute care, as in there's a whole rehab floor to it, and the patients stay in the hospital for 24 hours for days together, and they work with PTs and OTs as well as speech therapy. Let's say, for example, they've had a traumatic brain injury or spinal cord injury and a number of other things, right? So they get therapy more than an hour a day. So that is the difference between a bedside therapist and an acute therapist, where you see the patient for more than an hour a day. So you can literally work on so many things in terms of ADLs, um, having them just practice functional mobility training, all those things that you have been studying right now. Versus, let's talk about school setting, right? So I have been working with kids between the age group of 3 to 5 years. I've had children with diagnosis of autism, Down syndrome, and in the various stages of the spectrum of autism, right? So also here the therapy is one-to-one. You cannot usually have group therapy with kids per se. Um, Goes on for like about a half hour, which is the most generalized all over the US. There's different tools for them. Obviously, you have to keep the kids entertained. So there is a lot of, in terms of safety features inside the therapy room, there could be swings, there could be slides. So those things, and you work with the kid one-to-one. Of course, like how Tanvi mentioned about practicing evidence-based practice. So every year you are required to follow up on the newest evidence for treating the child or treating any kind of patient. That's, I think, most therapists in US will do that. It's not just the school therapist or the hospital therapist. You have to keep your knowledge up to date and try to apply as much as possible. Those are two very different settings. Like, this person has asked me a question about difference in the working at the hospital versus in school. And of course, the billing system also differs. So in the hospital, okay, so uh, in terms of billing the patient, in terms of insurance, I mean, so the billing differs, the way you do your paperwork differs greatly in the two settings. So that's all I have to share for now.
I think that was really helpful, and I'm sure Kanishka will agree as well in terms of seeing the practicalities of like work life in the US, comparing private, public, as well as working in a school setting versus working at the bedside. Based on what you've said, it's very different, and I'm sure that must have been an amazing experience to get all of that entire spectrum of experiences. I think that's amazing. So thank you so much, Bhakti, for that.
No problem.
All right, so moving on, we have two questions here. One is based in, this is from Andrea, what is generally the pay scale in India post-bachelor's degree and post-master's degree? So I guess we can probably push that on to Pankhuri and Vaishnavi, if she's here. I'm not sure Vaishnavi's here. But Pankhuri, can you field that question, please?
Hi everyone. Yeah, so I just wrote back to Andrea over it. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, there are different academies, different sports setups, which I can talk about sports over here. I think Kanishka can talk better about the neuro setup and other things. So as I mentioned, there are academies offering a good pay scale along with your accommodation, your food, your travel, and a TADA, that is a daily allowance or a total allowance, travel allowance that you get. And there are places which do not offer as much, but you get some experience. So really pick on what you need to do at the moment. If you're just a current, just completed your masters or just completed your bachelor's, go for something that somewhere that you will learn. And the moment you think that you're done learning and there's nothing else that you can learn, just switch to a different place where you can learn better, and you can authoritatively implement whatever you have learned before. And please do not settle for anything less, because that's what we are doing wrong, in India, and people are taking you for a ride. So yeah, that's what I'll say. So answer for neuro and other fields as well.
All right, great. Vaishnavi, would you like to chip in with any points if you have any?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
May I have the question again? Sorry.
Sure. The question is.
Joined in. I'm having dinner. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. The question is, what is generally the pay scale in India post bachelor's versus a post master's degree?
Okay, okay. I don't think it differs much, the pay scale. Like it's not like if you have a master's, it gives you like any advantage in terms of the pay scale. Again, I think I just read a comment, I think by Saurabh. It is about how you use your expertise, your skills, and climb the ladder. Basically, it could be a very slow process, but you need to be able to basically build a clientele of your own. So patient after patient, it's just like, the it just becomes like a word of mouth, and then that's how you build your clientele, and then that's how they come to you. And so I don't think it could be very subjective. Like I cannot put a number to it. But yes, if you go to these institutes and hospitals, the pay scale is not very remarkable. So you might have to consider other ways to have a good income in terms of feeling financially satisfied. But that takes a little time, or maybe a lot. I don't mean to discourage, but it could take some time. So uh, you should be able to find ways to earn well. I guess that's how it is, because the pay scale is not very impressive as such. If you had to put a number in it, it's not very impressive. But you could always find ways to earn better. Yeah.
All right, I think that's a very practical and helpful response, because, like Saurabh pointed out in the message group, it literally depends on how well you market yourself and how well you portray your skills and how you position yourself. So I think that's something which we aren't taught, but hopefully we can help you do something, or we can provide you resources which can help you market yourself. So, yeah, moving on to the next question. Does it make sense to spend a lot of time, to spend a lot to study abroad, sorry, and then come back to India right after? Okay, this is a very, I like sort of bumping up of this question, because this is in fact, it's the first question which people ask when they, or people are told to consider when they think about going abroad. And I think here it might be interesting to hear a little bit from Neha, who's in the UK and who's currently she just had about a year of clinical practice. So she's up to date with what the current situation is. So that might be interesting. Neha, go ahead.
Hi, Satyajit. So you have no idea how many people have asked me this question. And to be very honest, when I came for my master's, I came with the thought process that I'm going to go back to India after I finish my master's. And then things changed. I was kind of curious about how the practice here is. And a very important tip that I would give you is, if you are doing your master's abroad, even if it's not required for you to do so, just go for clinical hours. Approach anyone and everyone you can to get some clinical hours and clinical observations done. So for me personally, I had approached chiropractors, radiologists, um, knee surgeons, hand surgeons, and I went to their OPDs, went to their surgeries to just observe and see how things there work. And that's what made me more interested in the kind of practice that they have here. And obviously physios as well, strength and conditioning as well. Just try and do as many clinical hours as you can, just to go in and observe. And trust me, very, very few people will say no. I sent out like 100 emails, and even if they say no, they give you a reply, even if it's a no. So you know you're not wasting your time. Uh, so yeah, I finished around 70 to 80 clinical hours of observation. And that's when I decided to try and get a job here. And I think it completely depends on what your preference is. If you feel like the kind of lifestyle that you want here suits you better, then I think you should work here for a while, get some income saved, get some money saved, and then go back. If you feel like you want to open your own clinic, your own setup in India, then this is something that you can do. Go for clinical hours, get some experience in while you're doing your masters, and then go back. So this is just so that you make sure you take something back to implement in your own practice, because the way they work here is it's different. They focus a bit more on holistic healing, on mental well-being, on psychosocial factors as well. So there's a lot and there's always things that you will learn from working in a different country, working with different people, not just physios, not just orthopedic surgeons. Just try and venture out, speak to as many people as you can, and that's just what I would recommend. Like I said, this wasn't in my plan. I wasn't planning on working here at all, and things just happened. I got a job, and I got a visa as well. So things just happen sometime. To be honest, I'm still not sure about what my future plan is, but I'm just taking it as I am, trying to learn as much as you can. Just try to focus on getting good experiences, to getting in touch with people who inspire you, who push you, and people who you can learn from. That's what I would recommend.
I think that was like a brilliant response. And I really like the fact that you specifically mentioned going sorry, going out and learning from people who are practicing in other professions related to the healthcare field, especially chiropractors, radiologists, surgeons. Uh, as far as I know, no one is going to refuse to answer emails if it's from a student who wants to learn, because everyone wants to share their knowledge, everyone wants to provide experiences to others. It's just the fact that you need to you need to take the first step to actually go ahead and do that. And I think just to carry forward from that, Tanvi might be a very good person to talk about just that question, because she's had a very different experience. And so I'm just going to give that over to her to talk about this particular topic. Go ahead, Tanvi.
Thanks, always. I was actually looking forward to answering this question because from the way I look at this, I've had a lot of people ask me this question. And I personally think it's not about the money over here is what you should be thinking, though I understand and respect everybody's financial situation in this case. I think it's an investment you need to make in yourself, for yourself, because any investment you make is a compound interest which adds up for over the years. So whether you want to practice in the US, you want to practice in the UK, or anywhere across the globe, or you want to go back to India, at some point it's going to be a payoff for you. And it's for your personal satisfaction that you're doing this investment, is how I look at this. Sometimes the payoff is not immediate. For example, even in the US, you could spend $50,000 or $60,000 for your master's and, look for a job. Somebody may not even offer you that kind of a salary as you start, because you may just be a fresh graduate, or you could go back to India and want to do your own thing. But I think as you gain experience, as you gain more confidence, and like Neha said, if you associate yourself with people who constantly push you, inspire you, and motivate you to do things, I guess in the long run, it's going to be a huge advantage, because you have a more global perspective towards your practice, towards your lookout for your patients, than, something you're just surrounded by from wherever you come out of. So even though I think finances are important to consider, it's more like a personal choice in what you believe you should do. And I think it's important to venture out and communicate with people, even if it's working for free, if it's volunteering, if it's shadowing, if it's interning, because every little bit adds up. Nothing goes into waste. So if you feel like, oh, why should I work with a chiropractor? Why should I work with a nutritionist? You never know when those things are going to help you in the practice. So I would definitely be open to considering expanding your knowledge globally. And even if you want to go back to India and practice what you believe in, or you want to settle down in a different country altogether, I think it's something you should consider.
I couldn't agree more with Tanvi. I understand the practicalities of coming to a different country, and probably a lot of us have to take loans, and we have to pay back those loans. So um, that's not something which we can ever discount, uh, because you need to be able to pay back the loans that you've taken, and the financial strain is a reality for a lot of us. Uh, but if you have the opportunity, if at all you feel you can somehow handle or accommodate the finances, I I could not recommend coming abroad more. Like I would definitely recommend it, just because of the wealth of experience that other people have to share with you. But don't come abroad and don't come to a university and think I'm here, I've made it, and that's it. I get the degree, I'm set for life. This isn't an MBA. Okay, like
I couldn't agree more to you, Opez. And I guess it'll be very insightful if you could share your experience of, joining a PhD program. I think all of us have spoken about the post bachelor's, post master's experience, and I guess we haven't heard anything from you in respect to PhD as an option and what has been your experience so far. So I think if you could throw some light on that, I think that should also help with this specific question largely.
sure, I think I can do that. But just before we go into the whole PhD thing, I think sort of I'm not dissing the MBA. It is a useless degree, but okay, anyways. Um, Moving on. There's one question by Shreya, which I think we need to answer, which sort of goes very well along with the theme of the conversation we've been having. And that question is, let me just go back up and try to read that question. Yeah, her question is, Australia requires work X for a minimum period of 10 months, and specifically for UNISA, Southern Australia, I believe. But some recommend working for at least 2 years before going ahead for masters. I wanted to ask you guys if it's better to work for 1 or 2 years before pursuing masters. Now, this is a conversation which I think a lot of us who've graduated from DY have had with ourselves, and this is a conversation which everyone should have, or a thought that everyone should have about clinical practice immediately before pursuing masters. My 2 cents on this is yes, definitely work for a year or two, but set a deadline to get the master's degree, especially if you're going to stay in India. Uh, I would highly recommend that if you plan to pursue a master's in India or abroad, you do it for the right reasons. Don't do it just for the increase in pay scale. Because if you think about it, if you're going to stay in India, pay scale for a bachelor's to a master's, the difference for an entry level job would not be more than 10 or 15,000 per month. I mean, if you consider in the long term, the amount of effort that you're investing in getting a master's degree, going through the whole process, don't do it just for the money. That makes no sense. But rather do it to get some experience, or to at least get to know people who want to learn in life. If I don't know if that's a good way to say it, but people who are pushing themselves, who are driven to be the best in their fields, and that's why you do a master's or a PhD. You want to be better, and you want to become better as a clinician or as a researcher or as an educator. So work experience for me personally, I would recommend at least get a year, but make sure that when you're coming up to the end of that year, you do your SOPs, you do your LORs, and you actually apply at the end of the year. Don't make that 1 year, 3 years, and then that 3 years becomes 5 years down the line. Because if you delay it beyond 2 years, it's very hard to come back to an educational setup. So that is something which I feel very strongly about. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that particular topic? If you can just do a hand raise in the chat, because I can't see everyone's videos. I'm sorry. Oh, okay, I don't. Okay, Vaishnavi on that. Yeah, go ahead, Vaishnavi.
Uh,
Sorry, hold on. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So, Shreya, as I said, for UNISA, see, what happens is once you work post your bachelor's, you actually get a lot of idea about what reality is in the clinical setup. So you are taken from a very controlled setup to, I would say, something that is a little more real. So the more the better, obviously, and I couldn't agree with Oves more. This is one mistake that I made. So I think a course correction for you is that I never took any work experience after my bachelor's. I directly went on to my master's thinking what you just said, always, that maybe I will not be able to get into an educational momentum right away. I mean, if I miss it even for a year. So I was not confident that I would have the same educational momentum going if I don't join masters right away, which is, I think, sort of a mistake that I made, which you shouldn't. So not just for the requirement that it's 15 months for UNISA, I think take as much as experience as you want till you think that you are ready to work in a clinical setup, because these experiences, exam wise, I'll give you a good tip that these clinical experiences, the amount of patients that you have handled, it's going to make your learning easy, and it's going to make it very easy for you to also uh, go ahead with your licensing exams, because you've interacted with so many people, you know how to speak, you know how to take their consent, you know how to treat, you know what to do, what not to do. So all these things, the ethics, punctuality, discipline, I think something that lacks in our academic set. I'm sorry, but yes, it does. uh, Most of y'all do not come to the clinics, most of y'all are not punctual. So once you have an obligation to be disciplined, to be punctual, so it makes a big difference. So you go as and I think that is the whole reason why these universities demand a work experience in the first place, especially from India or something, from countries like ours, because they know that they need someone they can totally rely on in terms of the professional responsibilities. So I think the more the better. And again, not just UNISA, I think most of the universities require a work experience. So yes, and that also counts later on. This work experience, not just the amount of it, I think where you do it also matters. So don't take the work experience just for the heck of it. Go to a good place and understand things where documentation works, where your patient load is good. So it's not just on paper, but also in your practice, like with you.
I could not agree more. I think that Vaishnavi makes some really, really good points. And I think you guys would do well to follow what she has to say. Um, so we are actually getting several questions in the chat box. Just one pointer before we proceed with the questions is that if you have a question which we cannot for some reason answer, or it gets lost in the entire chat box, please feel free to contact any of us on the group or personal chat, or any other way that you'd like. The point of this is to give you all an overview of the questions or the topics that you all want to discuss. It is not to go into specifics of any particular field or particular type of therapy. Um, but you can always carry forward the conversation with whoever is available to guide you. So the reason that we've got everyone together is that they have volunteered their time to come here and share their knowledge and experiences, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to carry forward that conversation individually, moving ahead as well. So
Always, I just had two things to say before we move
sure.
on. One thing I've noticed is, not in a bad way, everyone's saying that which college should I go to, and is it like people don't ask me about the universities. All the people who have spoken here have been to good universities, okay? So don't aim to just get into any university you want. Always keep your aim high. It will matter which university you go to, because a university is sort of also giving you a great peer network. And the whole reason we thought about creating this alumni network is because this is the real value that a university brings to you. So going to a good university definitely has its own pros, and it might not affect your job, but it affects you and shapes you as a person. So please do not just apply for the heck of it. Go to a good university. And second thing is what Ovis just said. Now, we might not have all the people from all countries here. So if there are specific needs, you can always post and we can find someone to sort of connect you with. So don't worry about that. And about Canada, I think Bhakti can speak a little bit about Canada.
Yes, hi everybody, Bhakti again. So I have a little comparison on what documentation, what exams you need to do compared from Canada to US. So talking about the English proficiency, whatever exams, Canada needs an IELTS versus the US needs a TOEFL. So that is something you might want to consider before you take those exams, depending on what country you want to apply for. Um, Next is you need to get your degree, which is the bachelor's degree from our DY Patel University, getting it evaluated by the World Education Systems, or that is what it's called. I think it's called the WES is the short form for it. Um, so that will give you, yes, Saurabh, that's WES, and that will compare your bachelor's degree to the credit system, how the US and Canada universities work. And then you will have a more clarity as to what credits I lack in compared to the courses that are given here in different universities. Now, when you look for a university, very important thing is there is public and private sector universities all over US and Canada. Now, every university has their own way of forming the course. It is not a generalized thing all over the US. So I totally understand. A lot of people have asked me these questions about what do you look for in a course? What do you look for in a university when you are trying to finalize, when you are trying to apply? So what I did during my time was I actually made like a tabular form. What courses are offered by what university? Of course, Google is your best friend at that time because it will give you a whole breakdown as to what is the ranking of the university to begin with. So there comes in the picture where you want to decide where you want to practice as a clinical therapist or you want to pursue PhD in the future. So if you're, like, as we had already discussed this in the beginning, for people who have joined a little late, if you want to go into a more academic sector or more PhD kind of a sector or a teaching kind of a sector, then you need to choose a very high ranking university because they will have more access to funds, more mentors that will guide you as to how to go about things. Google will, if you Google out top ranking universities, top 100 universities, I recently just did it because I knew I was going to talk to all of you. Top 100 universities are the universities where I looked up, and most of them are really good. They have a good, they're not super high in terms of their fees, is what I mean. Next is you want to also look into FCCPT, which is foreign credentialing something for physical therapists. That is where you need to get your credits evaluated. They compare it to the universities here. And I think there's some technical issues going on. Excuse me, please. Yes, okay. So
Yeah,
I
good.
did read your post, Saurabh, about the exams. I totally agree with you. Canada exam is a little tougher, as they say, because um, when you take the license exam for the US, it is mainly just a theory based exam. But whereas in Canada, you need to do a practical as well as a theory exam. So when you go for your practical exam, I've heard from a lot of seniors that that part is a little difficult because we've not had that exposure in the US or in India. So they do look at a lot of minute details as to what your bedside manner and the way you go about the steps of evaluating a person when you're taking the practical exam. So those are the differences. Yes, Canada does have a checklist approach. I think Saurabh can also give us some pointers on Canada. What say Saurabh?
No, I think anything that's non-PT related, I can talk. PT, I'm just, no.
No, but you are saying most of the things I would like to say. So please go ahead.
Oh, no. It's just from what I've heard from folks. I'm just adding on. That's all.
Yeah, as in I am not based in Canada for sure, but I was just looking up a lot of these things that I've been saying from experience for a cousin of mine. So I have the same knowledge as probably you do about Canada. But if you guys really have any specific questions about Canada, feel free to shoot me a private message and I will try and get you the answers as soon as and as accurately as I can.
Sorry for like butting in here, but that is so typically Bhakti. Ask
What?
me whatever you want. I will give you everything you need. Just ask. I remember when I was in
Oh
my
my
first
gosh.
year of college, she was I think, I don't know, 3 or 4 years my senior, and this is the exact same line I heard back in 2009. So she's not changed, and I'm so happy to see that. So thank you for that.
Oh.
All right, so we can now move on. Like Saurabh said, okay, since you guys are specifically asking questions about Canada and Australia, um, we have people, at least I have some people I know who are working in Canada as educators as well as clinicians. So I've sent them invites to the group. I don't think they've accepted. But definitely once they join, I'll send them a private message as well. So we'll definitely have people from those countries who can join the group, and then we can try to connect you people to them. But just just be considerate of people's time when you email and message them. That's the only thing I'd like to say about that. And what else are the questions? Have we missed any particular questions? I remember there was something about admissions. Yeah, so since we're talking about admissions criteria, how to choose a college, what is the entire process, transcripts, letters of recommendation, that is an entire talk by itself. That you guys are asking these questions that we have had to slave over while applying to colleges for months. So, for example, writing a statement of purpose took me a month, and that was for one course because I had to do it and then get it edited, and I went through 6 or 7 edits. So it takes a while, but because I've gone through it, I have the resources personally to share with you people. I've made some posts on an LOR and an SOP. I have a lot more material to share. I just don't know how to do it best so that everyone can get access to it. But those are topics that we can definitely discuss in a specific country-wise talk like this. So maybe we can have a talk just on US admissions criteria, college, how to choose a college, how to judge based on rankings. So we can definitely have a talk on that, and I'm going to make a note to set that up for sure. And what about the next question then? Hey Saurabh, can you throw a light on moving away from PT as well? This should be an entertaining one. Saurabh, go ahead.
Love my reputation, entertaining one. Well, I think it's a long topic. Long answer short, it would be that work for a few years, like everyone has told you. Uh, while working through, make sure that you give it your best shot, because otherwise you'll find it as a way to sort of get away from something you're not good at. You want to be sure that you give your 100% and then make a choice that, oh yeah, I want to like move away from PT. Otherwise, you're going to look back and regret that, oh, I have chosen this path, but maybe I should have given more efforts in PT, and then you'll always be confused no matter where you go. So rule number one, give your 100%, give PT a shot. It's not bad at all. It's great. It's just that I had a different perspective. I wanted to make a change on a larger level. And when I was doing clinical practice, working with say, the football team or something like that, it was treating maybe 20 people a day or 15 people a day. And for me, I thought I wanted to do bigger things. So if you have some realization of this sort, you should definitely look at other professions. Another experience that really played along and contributed to this decision was the fact that I worked with the Rotary Club of Caduceus, or worked with other people who were doing management consulting, spoke to a lot of people who were doing investment banking, private equity, And my interest sort of grew into that direction where you can affect systems, where how can you drive systemic change, right? You have 24 hours, everyone has 24 hours. How can you reach, to the goal that makes you happy and makes you satisfied in some sense, personally and professionally? And PT wasn't giving that to me. It took me 2 years to realize. In 2016, I changed my profession. And this was like at the peak of my so-called career in PT, when I was working with the Indian football team as one of the youngest therapists. And that is when I decided that, hey, you know what? I'm young right now, and it's okay to just make the move. And I started working in management consulting, specialized only in healthcare, in innovation. And ever since then, I've just been away from PT. I haven't practiced for the past 4 years now. Yeah. And I think, yeah, just keep an open mind and be honest to yourself. I know it's tough, but just be brutally honest to yourself. Otherwise, you're always going to be confused, and keep an open mind. If you have specific questions, I can answer. Otherwise, I can go on and on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Saurabh, and he's an amazing person to contact, and he's always available. He is someone who
I am not always available.
he is
Okay?
always
I am
available.
not
He's always
always
going
available.
to answer no matter what time of day or night you text him or message him. He's always going to be there. So that does not mean that you text him at 4 in the morning, please. Um, but yeah, he is a good person to contact in terms of just asking for general life advice and anything outside of PT, especially in public health, especially in management, artificial intelligence, anything to do with that sort of telehealth or anything of that sort, which is slightly away from the traditional physical therapy. I think he's a great person to stay in touch with for that. Um, yes, he will be available even at 4, but we do not want to disturb him then. Okay, so please don't. I don't want to be.
But one thing just to add on is, I think make an effort to get to know other professions. We just have this tunnel vision, and the minute you think of, oh, if not PT, what else? And you don't have anything to look at, so you suddenly come back to, oh yeah, only PT. So just meet more and more new people, get to know how their work is, try to understand what they're doing. Because if you don't have things to choose from, you have an illusion of choice. You're going to be stuck with PT only.
Great point there. And that's one of the reasons I'd recommend coming abroad to study. Even if you do a PT related course, just the fact that you're in a university which has so many courses and so many people doing so many different things, it allows you the opportunity to pick their brains and ask them what they do and how their life is and what they're working on. But at the end of the day, honestly, it depends on you. The amount of questions you ask, the quality of questions you ask of people really reveals a lot about your own ambitions and your own passions. So ask more questions and the more you ask, the better you get at asking the right questions. So ask more questions. All right, so moving ahead, is there any question which we have not discussed other than the admissions criteria, which I think we can definitely discuss in detail in a later talk? Besides that, have I missed anything at all? If anyone can scroll up and see if I've forgotten anything. So we have a question from Sanjana. What are your thoughts on DPT in the US? Who wants to take this up, Tanvi or Bhakti? I guess either one of them can take it up. Okay, we can start with Bhakti for now and then switch over to Tanvi.
Okay, so as I mentioned some time back, DPT is an entry-level course in the US, meaning that because of the difference in the education system in the US and India, so basically when we finished 12th, we were called that you passed out of junior college, but here it's called high school. And after high school or after 12th in the US, they go to 4 years of college where they actually do a majors in biology. And after that, they do a DPT, which is sort of a bachelor's degree specific in physical therapy. Whereas in the India, after 12th, we directly went to our bachelor's college. So because you have already graduated once, which is the bachelor's in India, you cannot repeat the same in the US. That's like a whole universal rule. You cannot repeat a bachelor's in the same field that you have already done in. So that's why I would consider DDPT, which is a transitional DPT, which basically you get your degree as the bachelor's from India. You get your credits evaluated by WES. You compare your credits, what all courses you have done from India already, which were not covered compared to the degree here in the US. And then you do only those credits that are required. So then you earn a transitional DPT. Usually it's from anywhere between a year to a year and a half. And then you are eligible to do the national PT exam or the license exam, which is called the NPTE. Yes. So I think Tanvi can go ahead now.
Bhakti, I think you've covered, more or less everything. I'm not sure if there is honestly anything more to put or shed any light on at this point, um, because of our educational experience in India, we do study most of it. It's more like the PT label you get after your education in the US, which is a DPT, as we pronouncedly use BPTH. So I think you've covered more or less everything.
All right, great. Thank you both for that. I know that's a very that's a topic that comes up in every conversation that I have with anyone who wants to work in the US. DPT versus TDPT. Which one should we go for? What are the opportunities? What are the pros and cons? Honestly, I'm the last person who can actually shed light on that, because as far as I'm aware, the regulations seem to be changing every year. I mean, it's ridiculous now the amount of times they've changed the regulations. When I last checked, I think this was last year, there were 4 colleges in the US offering a TDPT. But that was last year. I have no idea what the situation is this year. So, Tanvi or Bhakti, if you know anyone who's currently doing a TPT or a TDPT, or who's just graduated from one of those programs, would it be possible for you to probably ask them to shed some light on that topic, maybe create a post or add them to the group so that they can share something with all of us?
Yeah, actually, TDPT can be offered in 2 ways. One is doing the course in the university per se, and there's also a lot of online courses available to do the TDPT at from the comfort of your home. So I think that is why you feel that a lot of colleges are not offering it, but I do know a lot of colleges that are still offering, and you can just simply Google search and a lot of information is just right there. Like I said earlier, that I had actually looked up all this before I joined the chat so that I can advise better, as to what's going on currently. So there is a lot of universities still offering online courses.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely do that. We can definitely look up something for sure. So if you guys have any specific questions about DPT versus TDPT, perhaps you all can post it on the group, so that, like Saurabh suggested, it helps a lot to go back and then refer, and then other people who have the same questions can actually get those answered as well. And if you, for some reason, don't feel comfortable sharing your doubts in the entire group, feel free to, private message either me, Saurabh, or any one of us, so that we can then post it anonymously, and then other people can help answer that question. All right. So moving on, I think Neha would be a good person to answer Sai's question on strength conditioning and sports medicine, as well as Pankhuri's question on a PG diploma. So I'm going to move the video over to Neha. Go ahead, Neha.
Hi again, guys. Okay, sorry, my phone is just tripping all over the place. Anyway, so to start off by answering Pankhuri's question about PG DIP, which is postgraduate diploma. So in the UK, you have the option of exiting the course at 3 exit points. So you can do a certificate course, a PG DIP, which is 60 credit points, or you can do a full master's, which is 120 credit points. So the only difference between a PG DIP and a master's is that you don't do your dissertation, which is 60 credit points, and then you exit at a PG dip. This will be a much shorter course, and I think it's a very good option for people who are very sure that they want to come back and work in India. It will be much cheaper and you'll get the experience as well. Plus, in your time here, you can obviously go for clinical observations and ask people to volunteer and get whatever you need from this course. So that's an option. Um, Again, because I've done sports medicine, uh, it's very varied. So we have modules such as sports injuries, diagnosis. We have even ultrasound, strength and conditioning. We have geriatric health. Uh, we have topics such as travel. Travel health for athletes. So it's very, very varied. The only thing about sports medicine is you have to know why you want to do a sports medicine course. What do you want to get out of it? If you want to work as a physio after doing a sports medicine course, how is it going to help you? What are you going to get out of it? This is the question that I asked myself before doing sports medicine. Why did I do this course? Because when I was working for a football club, I realized that a physio is, if you're a sports physio, you're supposed to know more. I felt like the skill sets that I had after my bachelor's weren't enough. I was asked a lot of questions about x-rays, how to diagnose, when to refer it to someone, when to refer the case to someone else. So when is a different intervention required? And I felt like I didn't know enough. So that's why I chose to do sports medicine. So you have to know your why. Always know your why. Uh, Again, if you want to do sports science, it's I won't say it's similar to sports medicine. It's a bit different when it comes to their modules because it's more about nutrition. It has more about exercise testing, strength testing. So it'll be a bit different than sports medicine. But it again completely depends on what kind of niche field do you want to get to after you finish the course. And a very good idea would be to just go through the websites and check all the modules and ask your program directors as many questions as you can before you enroll into the course, because that's something that I think I didn't do, and I could have inquired more about the course where I didn't. So that's one mistake that I think you shouldn't do. Just feel free to ask as many questions as you can to your program director or whoever is in charge of the course.
Yeah, I could not agree more with everything that Neha has said. I especially like the fact that she said the fact that if you want to come back to India, you have the opportunity to do a PG diploma and you don't have to continue down that path where you do a thesis. Because honestly, I feel even though most master's courses are research related, for people who want to enter into clinical practice, I feel it would be more helpful to include a clinical component in courses in the US. And I believe some universities have that, but I think Jared might be a good person to talk to other alongside Neha, obviously. So those are people you might want to stay in touch with. And before we move on, Bhakti just wanted to add something about the DPT. So I'm just going to shift the mic back. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. For folks interested in the US DPT program, so as I mentioned earlier, there's a universal rule all across the world that you cannot repeat a bachelor's in the same subject if you've already earned a bachelor's from any other country. So with terms of this, if at all there are people in the group who have completed their 4th year and who wish to do a DPT, if you do not do your internship from India and directly enroll into a DPT program, I think that is allowed because you have still not earned your bachelor's degree, because they will not provide you a bachelor's degree from DY unless you have finished your internship. So this is 99% correct, but I would also advise for people who want to do a DPT program to check with the university you're applying at to just like 100% confirm this news. I do know of a couple of people who have done this in the past. So I wanted to add this just like a good to know thing in the back of your head that if you're headbound that I don't want to do a TDPT versus I want to do only a DPT, then this is your option on how to go about it. Okay.
I had no idea that something like that existed. And I think if I had known that beforehand, I would be giving very different advice to people about internship.
Yes, that's why I wanted to add, because I came to know about this even same thing. I got to know about it after I graduated and did my master's here in the US.
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend people explore that option. But again, we're specifying. I don't know if there's anything like I don't know if you can hold us accountable for your own actions, but please look up the university's requirements. Please see the recommendations that they have. Email the university's admissions committees and officers and um, their offices basically, and ask them about this before you take any drastic steps such as not doing your internship, just to be on the safer side. But thank you so much, Bhakti. That was really helpful. I did not know that. All
I
right.
always,
Yes, Saurabh. I think
yeah,
I got your message about it being overtime. Does
yeah.
anyone? Sorry, let me just switch the video. Does
Yeah, I mean,
anyone?
if folks have
Yeah.
questions, we can go ahead. I mean, it's a Saturday night here at least.
Oh,
And I don't know
sorry,
if
because I'm just. It's more.
everyone's stuck at home, right? Like no one's going out and partying or anything like that. But it's amazing. I thought maybe we would have like it would be super embarrassing. In 20 minutes, no one would show up. And as time went by, people just went on increasing. It's been more than an hour. It's been 1 hour 40 minutes, and we have 33 people here. So
I
it's.
am sorry about the time that has taken. Apologize to
But please
everyone
go
for
ahead if you want to.
extending that. Yeah, I just saw a message from Satyajit Vaishnavi raising her hand for the last 45 minutes. Vaishnavi, I am so sorry. I don't see a hand raise on the chat, so I am just going to pin you and then we can carry forward. I'm so sorry.
Not the last 45 minutes. Stop exaggerating. Oh yes, but sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, I could laugh and this meeting could go for another hour, maybe. You all know me. I shouldn't break into a laughter. But yeah, so always my question is specifically to you. What I want to know, since you are enrolled into a PhD program, what I wanted to ask is, does it, like, what matters more, the university or the university that offers the topic that I want? Like, there is a specific research question that I want to work on, and maybe it is available at a university that may not be well ranked or may not be as good as the well ranked universities, but it provides what I want. So what would you like? Would you compromise in terms of the rank? I mean, not a lot, but still, like, I know university matters and the infrastructure matters and the faculty matters, but what if the faculty is what I want and they have the topic that I want to work on, they have a project ongoing? So what would you choose, like, if you had to make a choice like that? How did you go about making that choice?
Um, that's a loaded question. That's almost like asking someone, okay, how do you choose a job? If you have three job offers and you sort of like a little bit about each one of them, how do you pick one of them? The way I look at it is, first, don't follow my example, because I have a very weird way of thinking. I trust more in people than I think than in like facilities or project ideas and things like that. I chose my university simply based on the fact that the professor that I'm working with was extremely responsive to all my emails. He was very understanding, very accommodating. Um, and he basically portrayed that he genuinely cared that I come to his lab and work with the kids that we're working with. So that was my criteria. That is not what I'd recommend to anyone else because they're not me. Um, if you really want to know about it practically, I would simply say look at funding. That is the single
Yeah.
most important thing that you'd want to think about is funding. because you might have the best research idea in the world. But if, for example, you want to work on, say, this is not PT related, but you wanted to do something on, say, LGBT communities, in this present environment with this administration, Trump, I don't think that would be funded. So even though your idea might be amazing, it might make a huge difference. You have to consider the ground realities for funding. So top of the list would be funding for sure. So if your advisor is well funded or has extensive experiences getting funds from the NIH, the top, grant, the top institutes which give grants like NIH, NSF, all of those, then I would definitely look at someone like that. The second thing you want to look at is the advisor himself or herself. If they can give you time, if they have a set structure, if their working style matches with yours, and I know you can't find out how people work, but what you can do is contact the other people in the lab, ex people, like ex students who worked with the faculty advisor, see if your working style matches with theirs. Um, that's really important, and that's not done enough, unfortunately. And the third thing I would look at is facilities.
Okay.
Because you might want to do a sports, like a sports PT based intervention. But if you're in a university that does not have the equipment, or has the equipment but has only one or two instruments that you need, and that is being shared between 5 labs, you're going to have a lot of difficulty getting your athlete schedules and your lab schedules to match. So these are the practical aspects of things. We can definitely carry forward this particular line of discussion, because the reason I'm not spoken much during this entire conversation is because if I start, I don't stop. And Saurabh knows that. And we don't want that for people. So,
That's true
yeah,
for my laughter.
yeah, so I think Saurabh justified it very well. Advisor,
Yeah.
funding should come first. Second, advisor. Third would be the instrumentation, whatever you need, and then interest comes last. It doesn't matter what your interest is. Your interest will change over time. Please understand that your interest will always change. You might think, I definitely want to work in football, in ankle rehab or prehab, and that will change, because for reasons beyond your control, it might change, or your own interest might change. So don't think just about your interest. Forget about your interest. Think about, can I get this done in 4 years or 5 years? Think about, will I learn enough to, at the end of it, start my own PhD program, or start my own lab, or work as a postdoc? Those are the important things you need to think about. So yeah, that's my 10 cents. Anyone else have any questions? I think we can
Thank you.
stop it now,
Yeah.
and probably call it a day. Thank you all for joining us, especially thank you Vaishnavi, thank you Bhakti, Pankhuri, Neha, I think she's just left. Tanvi has left as well, and the rest of you guys. I hope this was helpful for you all. I think I have recorded this, but I'm not sure if it's done properly. So I will try to upload it. In case it's not, I hope you guys have gotten what you wanted out of this. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again soon. All right, have a great one. Take care, stay safe, and practice social distancing, please. Bye.